So welcome. You are here for this live workshop. I have titled The Fed Up Nurse. And it's kind of, in the past I've called it the burned out nurse. I've called it moral distress and burnout. I've called it nursing mental health. And it's interesting. I play with the different titles to see what lands for people. I'm definitely getting this flavor of being fed up in the nursing culture. So hence why I kind of shifted that to change the title of it for this go around. I'm just moving my microphone here so I can be a little bit louder. So as you know, my name is Sandra Payne. I am the founder of Sandra Payne Wellness and the creator of the Nurse RX online coaching program and the community, and the host of the Endless Silence podcast, which really is about showcasing the truth of what nursing is. We have so many different people in the world who really, I don't think as a general rule, have a strong understanding of what it is to be a nurse. And so the podcast is really about showcasing the truth and stories of nurses. Hi, Natalie. And so if you've been struggling with feeling burned out, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, feeling exhausted in nursing, or even just thinking about how to navigate the intense distress that you're feeling as a nurse, then I know that you're going to find everything I have to share here today valuable. Today, my plan is to walk you through 3 keys to resolve your overwhelm. Now, even when I say that, I'm like, Sandra, that's bullshit. Because the reality is like, I got to pull something to offer in this. I can't give everything. I mean, you'd only absorb such a small percentage of it anyways. But the reality is it takes a lot more than just 3 steps to create the changes and find the solutions that we're looking for and to find the clarity in order to move forward in this profession. So there is a lot more that's involved in these 3 keys, but what I've tried to do is I've tried to look at my entire journey of healing and how I've gotten to where I am today from where I was, and tried to pull out the 3 pieces that I think have the biggest bang for their buck and are maybe some of the more simple things to implement that don't require a lot of facilitation or support or guidance around. They're things that we can absolutely do for ourselves. So today I'm going to walk you through those 3 keys, and really it's this process that I'm kind of introducing you to is a process of overcoming trauma and moral distress as well as burnout, but also the symptoms of that, including depression and anxiety. And of course, we're somewhat limited in what we can do in 90 minutes, and I don't want to overwhelm, especially a population of people who are already overwhelmed. So I'm going to tackle these 3, and so I hope that sounds all good to you, and we're going to dive right in. And I'm going to hope that my little thing moves. There we go. I know that you're here today because nursing just isn't what it once was. We are in many ways grieving. When we talked about this today in our group, where many of us are grieving what we believed nursing was going to be for us, and we're left with uncertainty and overwhelm, fear, confusion, sadness, grief, shame, and so much more. We spend so much of our lives investing in becoming a nurse, investing in the profession and what you thought it stood for when you got into it, what you thought it was going to be like, and it's become this big part of our identity. But you're tired. You're tired of being unsupported, tired of being treated as if you don't matter, tired of being hung out to dry, tired of being unable to provide the care and support to your patients that you know is needed. You're tired, and you want to find a better way, right? You want to find a better way so that you can live your life in that better way, feeling happy, feeling fulfilled and passionate, feeling valued and supported, and really having this the word that many people use is balance, and I kind of cringe at that word. I like the word harmony, finding this harmony in your life. And so today we're going to be talking about just that and answering the questions that I know are probably on your mind, such things as possibly, how can I manage the stress and the emotional overwhelm and more if things continue the same, or if it keeps getting worse? Or maybe a question like, how much more can I really take? How much longer can I hold this all together? How did I even get here? How much of my life have I missed out on? Where do I even go from here? I don't know how to get unstuck from this. What do I do? Is leaving nursing the only option that allows me to find peace and feel safe and supported? And hopefully we're going to explore some of these questions and more today. And there will be an opportunity toward the end as well for us to have some discussion and conversation. If there is additional questions, please, you can put them in the chat, or you can save them for the end to ask me live. So this is being recorded, but just so you know, it's just my face being recorded and the slides so that I can use it to share the replay. So I will stop the recording when we're having our discussion, just so that we can keep that part of it private for us. So yeah, and at the end of it too, I'm going to take an opportunity to give you details of what the Nurse RX program looks like. I know the two of you that are here right now, well, Natalie is actually in the program, so she's very familiar with what it is. And Jocelyn, I know we've chatted about this already, but I will take some time just to dig into that so you can be really clear on what that looks like. And Natalie, if at that point you want to check out, you're more than welcome to. But before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to share a little bit about my story with you, because you might be wondering kind of why I'm here today and how you can find this ease and joy and freedom that you're looking for. I've been a nurse for 15 years, but I actually can't technically call myself a nurse anymore, but I say foo-foo to them and their rules. Mainly, I worked in the NICU and in the community chronic disease nursing. If I'm being very honest, which I try to be, I struggled my whole career. I struggled with burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, overwhelming emotions, and moral distress. However, actually during my career, I had no idea. There was no language shared around this. I definitely did not have language and understanding around it. There was no open discussion about the realities of the mental and emotional impact that this job would have. And because no one talked about it, I just figured it was me, that I was a failure, that I thought I just wasn't cut out for this job. Instead of being supported in what I was going through, I lived with paralyzing shame. But nobody knew, because shame has this really powerful ability to allow you to hide your pain in plain sight. And this is something I have learned from my experience working with nurses and the different conversations I've had. This is something that is pervasive in the culture of nursing. We hide the reality of our struggle. And because it's not talked about, that shame and that feeling of failure and like there's something wrong with me, that it just breeds in the silence. Hence the start of the End the Silence podcast, which is about bringing these stories to the light so that we can have these conversations and we can, almost normalize, but not in a way of saying that it's okay, but normalize in a sense of like, if you're going through this, you're not alone, but it doesn't make it okay. We do need to create some change. So finally this year, I made the choice to officially let go of being a registered nurse. And in case you're wondering why, it's because really the last number of years since I've been on my own journey, I've just felt myself becoming more and more misaligned with the system that we work in. And it's not really what I've discovered. It's not really a system about health. It's a system about sickness. And in some ways we make it worse. And since 2015, I've really been on this journey of my own healing and exploring so many different alternative modalities and understanding of the body from a holistic lens, understanding the natural capacity of the body to communicate and to heal itself. And then to have to go with this new understanding and this new lens that I was really living and embodying, and then to have to go and work in the system that we have, it created so much internal conflict with what I really believed healthcare should look like and how I desired to deliver and support and care for people, and what was actually happening in the system. The reality of this sick care system that we have, it created this massive moral conflict for me. And this internal conflict was tearing me apart for years. Witnessing and experiencing everything that's happened over the last couple years was the final straw for me. Moral integrity for me is a core value. It's something that I hold very close, and one that I thought the nursing profession and healthcare upheld also. But what we've witnessed unfold in our system, particularly again over the last couple of years, has been anything but. And it became very clear to me that the values that I hold and how I desire to serve and care and help others to heal are just not aligned with our current system and the way that we are expected to carry out what nursing has become. And so as I chose to officially close the chapter on that book of my life, even though it was really clear to me that that was the right choice, it wasn't easy. And so I really resonate with where a lot of people are at right now when they're feeling, this uncertainty of like, how do I go back? Do I go back? Do I continue? Do I leave? What do I do? Because I've been in that space, and making that decision to walk away, it took me a long time to come to a place that I felt okay with it. And even when I did finally pull the plug, it was still filled with a lot of grief and worry and uncertainty, and there was sadness and also a lot of anger. But it also had these new threads for me that I hadn't felt in when I was, tied to the nursing profession. And it was these new threads of freedom and a relief to no longer have to be sort of chained to any of it. And I was able to, take that opportunity and fully step into my work as a wellness coach and the program, the Nurse RX program that I run for nurses who are struggling in a lot of the same ways that I did and that you might be also, particularly with, the shame, the feelings of unworthiness, or like there's something wrong with me that I don't fit into this box that that I'm supposed to fit into as a nurse. Or maybe you're having a lot of self-doubt and self-criticism and self-judgment. Maybe there's a lot of fear happening for you. There definitely was for me. Worry, uncertainty, emotional overwhelm. I mean, my God, the amount of days that I spent just sobbing and crying and just crippled with emotions that I didn't know what to do with, depression, anxiety, and so much more. The nurses that I have truly had the utmost honor and privilege of coaching and working with in the program and connecting with in this community that we've created has been the greatest gift of choosing what was right for me and walking the path that was right for me, which meant walking away from nursing. And some of the graduates of my program have revealed some really profound transformations, and I'm excited to be able to share a few of them with you here today. But before all of this, before I founded Sandra Payne Wellness, which is, I know, like the most creative name I could have come up with, I was so stuck. I was showing up for work. I was doing my best to help people in deep ways, but meeting nothing but obstacles every step of the way. I know some of you can resonate with that. It's like, everywhere I went, it was no funding, or they pulled funding, or they pulled resources, or they pulled nurses, or there was no management, or less time, less support. But it just felt like they were constantly taking and constantly putting up barriers to me being able to fulfill what I really wanted to do for people. And that I could feel, like deep in my bones that I knew we needed to be providing for these people. And I know so many of you feel that too. It was so clear to me that what I was doing wasn't really helping people to heal. It was just prolonging their sickness, and in some ways actually hastening it, which made me sick inside. I slept all the time. I cried all the time. I was absolutely irritable. I was jaded, miserable, so depressed that it seeped into all the corners of my personal life and affected my relationships with my family and my children. I was checked out because I didn't know how to deal with it, and because I wasn't dealing with it. And eventually it started to show up in my work life. And it's interesting how I allowed it to impact so much of my personal life, but still was able to show up in that job, still was able to do what I needed to do. But when I started to notice that I had checked out of basically everything in my life, that was a big wake-up call for me. Because the only way that I really knew how to deal with it in that time, with everything that I was feeling, was to not deal with it, was to not feel it at all. But that actually made things significantly worse. I was drinking a lot more than I should have been, and possibly even a lot more than I ever have. And I've been a teenager, so I was unmotivated. Self-care was like not even a thing at all. I didn't do anything for myself. I wouldn't even be able to tell you what I wanted to do for myself. I was so numb and disconnected from what I needed. And I was distant from my family. And I even found myself in a space of dreaming of running away, of leaving it all, leaving my family, my children. And like that, I mean, that truth inside of me was killing me but I didn't know what to do with it. And I just bottled it all up until one day that bottle just kind of shattered. And I ended my own silence and I shared with somebody all the pain that I was going through. And that day changed my life. And I don't remember exactly what I said to that person or what they said to me, but for the first time in, I don't even know how long, but a really, really long time, I felt heard and I felt validated and I felt seen and accepted for everything that I was going through. And in that space, I also felt hope. That day was a very small moment in time in the whole trajectory of my entire life. But that moment in time was a moment that allowed me to shift the direction that my life was going by just the slightest little degree. And that one degree opened up a whole new path, a whole new life. I started learning more about myself, my mental and emotional health, trauma and abuse, and the impact that that has. I looked at so many different alternative healthcare providers, including a coach, actually multiple coaches by this point, who helped me to navigate myself in ways that I had never been taught or even considered. And it definitely is not something that is a part of our system. And I realized that there is this whole other world of healing and health out there that really allows us to look at people with that holistic lens. It's not just a word that's used. It actually is a way of addressing people and their challenges and helps them to uncover the root causes of their challenges and their diseases and to create lasting change and create actually true healing. I discovered so much about myself and what I valued, and it set the course for what has unfolded since that day. What I discovered through my own journey of healing my mental health and creating a life that is aligned with my core values is that if you want to feel relief from the overwhelm and the burnout and the exhaustion, if you want to find freedom, ease, and joy, then you, at the very least, need to know these three things that I'm going to share with you today. And like I said, there's so many more things, and Natalie can attest because she's been in my program, but I can talk about so many different things because there's a lot of different elements. But when I look at the past 6 years that I have been sort of exploring this journey, I can see that there are some real key pieces that have allowed me to continue on this path. And so that's what I want to share with you today. And it's really allowed me to find this whole new level of confidence and self-love and self-trust to make empowered decisions in my life so that I can choose what's right for me and to take that action and also use it to help others and to go on and teach and guide others how to do the same with their own lives. And it's not that I have all the answers for each person, that's within you. But sometimes what it takes is a safe space in order to find those answers. So before we get into those three keys, let's just take a quick look at what's going on in nursing. And now none of this is going to be a shock for you. But what I want you to consider as you look at this is why are nurses, oh, that's the wrong one. I'm a little behind. Oh, I'm quite behind. Hang on. Here we go. One more. There we go. Why are nurses burning out at such critical rates? Why are nurses leaving the profession at unprecedented rates? Why are nurses afraid to speak up about the abuse and injustice and unsafe working conditions? Why are nurses treated with such disrespect? Why are they undervalued so much? Why are the rates of depression and anxiety and substance abuse and suicide in nurses so high? I'm sure you have some answers for these questions, and I want to invite you to share why you think things are the way they are right now. Why? Why do you think? You can put that in the chat, or we can definitely have some conversation at the end. But this really is a mental health crisis that we are facing in nursing. We are in a critical state. And the reality is that our healthcare system is crumbling. It's falling apart. I loved the analogy that that was used today to describe it. It's like, yeah, I think it was you actually, Natalie, you were sharing that it's like you put your finger in one hole that's, you know, sprung a leak, and then there's another leak over there, and you have to try to reach it and put out and, you know, plug that hole, and another hole sprung. And that's where we're at right now. It's all falling apart. And the people within that system, the nurses and the other healthcare professionals, are the ones that are holding it together, but it's unsustainable. So what are you supposed to do? This is the reality that nurses are facing, yet many are feeling just like confused and overwhelmed and unable to find the right solutions to help them. They're feeling trapped and stuck in this vicious cycle on a sinking ship. In the work that I do in the Nurse RX program, I get to connect with women every day who are facing these heavy issues. The nurses who are stuck on the ship and unsure what to do, or know what they want to do but not sure how to do it, or even if they can. And also there are nurses in my program who have already chosen to get off of the ship, or there are some that were actually tossed overboard by the government and our employers. Every day I circle up with women nurses who are going through this same experience, and knowing what I know now and having changed my own life to find more passion and excitement and ease and flow, it's become my personal mission to help them and to help you. Because I know now that there is a better way, that this storm, this chaos, is in fact an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us, for you, and that's what I want to share with you today. Before I really dig into these 3 keys, one thing that is so super important when we are doing any of this kind of self-work or healing work is honesty. Honesty is really the first step to any path of change, because if we're not willing to look at ourselves and to own the truth of where we are at, to take accountability for our lives and responsibility for our lives, then we can't really move past this part. If I'm in denial about how things are really going in my life, then how am I ever going to create change? Honesty is a prerequisite to self-development, to growth, to learning, to exploration, to healing. It's non-negotiable, meaning you can't skip it. I mean, you can take action, you can do different things that will help. But the rest, it really doesn't work. It doesn't create lasting transformation if you're not willing to be brutally honest with yourself and face where you are at. So I'm going to invite you right now, actually, just to, if you feel up for it, to dose yourself with some of this honesty. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can just reflect on these questions. When you consider your life and all the different areas of your life, where is there stress or heavy emotional experiences? What parts of your life don't feel aligned for you? What parts aren't really serving you? How are they making you feel? And even more so, how is it impacting your entire life? Is it affecting your relationships, your family? Is it affecting your sleep, your mood, your self-care? I sent in the email, it's called a symptoms of stress questionnaire, or really like a stress inventory, and it helps you to look at the different areas of your life and the different areas of your health, and to see how stress might be having an impact for you. Having this kind of honest, moment with yourself, although it's often quite difficult and uncomfortable, it's essential for us to move forward. I can't create change until I acknowledge and I'm open and honest and willing to look at the areas of my life that require the change. And the same goes for you. So if you haven't looked at that stress inventory or that symptoms of stress questionnaire, I'll invite you to do that after the session. It's in the emails, and it can be triggering to really look at that and to see, holy shit, look at all of this that's happening. It can be quite overwhelming to take that in, and it can for some people, for sure, set them off in a way of, different symptoms and signals inside of your body. And so I want you to just be gentle with yourself as you do that. As you take any dose of honesty, it's important to be gentle with ourselves. We didn't get here overnight, so shifting it's not going to be an overnight process. And all of these symptoms that you might check off on that list, or maybe that are coming to your mind as we're talking today, I want you to know that they are normal responses to an abnormal level of stress that you're facing. They are signals from your body. They're communication, they're messages. They're like the indicator lights in your car telling you that you're in a state of dis-ease. You can ignore the signals and all the symptoms, but that's not going to make them go away. So I encourage you to have this honest lens and to get real with yourself. Is this how you want to spend your life? And now, as I move through these 3 keys, I'll just take a breath there because that was kind of a big thing to just transition from. But I'm going to dig in here. So if you need more time with that kind of, what do they say, like come to God moment or something like that, where you're just having that moment of honesty with yourself. If you need a moment, just take your moment. And if you need to write some stuff down, just really to honor yourself as we go through this. Anytime we're talking about the realities of our struggles, it can bring up a lot of stuff for us. So I'm going to encourage you as we move into these 3 keys that I'm going to talk about to take some notes if you like, but mostly to allow yourself to land on one of these 3 keys that really jump out at you. And you can take notes on the rest, but I want you just to really zero in on one thing that jumps out and that you feel like you can create a commitment to spend some additional time with. Okay, here we go. So number 1, the first key is reprioritizing your life. And I know I keep saying your name, Natalie, because I feel like we talked about all of this today in our call. So it's going to feel like a bit of a refresh, which is always good. But so the first key is reprioritizing your life. We can't reignite this internal fire if we don't have any fuel to put on it. If our cup is completely empty, how do we possibly expect to have any kind of energy? How often, consider this, how often do you prioritize your own needs? How often do you listen to the internal signals inside your body that are asking for what you need? How often do you dismiss them? How often do you even ask yourself what you need? And if you do hear it, how often do you actually take the time to nourish yourself and give yourself what you need? Or are you constantly stuck in a pattern of putting other people's needs above your own? If you are, I mean, we can just own that right now. I've been there. I still get there sometimes. It is woven into the fabric of being a woman, that we are selfless givers, martyrs even at times. We give. That's how we are bred. I mean, from the time we're children, we are rewarded and, put into these roles where we are giving to others and nourishing others and caring for others. We're not taught that it's okay to look after ourselves too, for the most part. Some people were blessed with getting a different lesson in life, but for the most part, most of us were not given that lesson. And so when it comes to prioritizing your life, of course, the words self-care come up. And I can't even tell you how many times I've heard this message of self-care when it comes to our mental and emotional health. And I've been dealing with mental health challenges for most of my life since I was in my early teens. And definitely self-care is a common message, right? I've heard it so many times that I don't have a good feeling when I say it. So, but I believe it's like the most commonly used general advice that's riddled with shame messaging. First of all, it's insulting, because we all know how important self-care is, right? So if someone says you need to do some more self-care, like it's a bit insulting to hear that, because we know how important it is. Or do we? I mean, do we really know how important self-care is for us? What does self-care mean to you? You can share that in the chat if you like. What does self-care mean to you? In nursing, I remember it's really talked about as caring for our basic needs. But it's actually so much more than that. And many people believe it's like these lavish, expensive experiences, having a me day, where we go to the spa, we get a pedicure, massage, or all those things. And don't get me wrong, those things are amazing and they're lovely, but they're not reasonable as routine things or even as weekly or monthly things. And so although they may refuel us for, the day or maybe a few days, it doesn't last. So yes, self-care is our basic needs, and it is also these, fun, expensive, lavish experiences, but it's also everything else in between. Everything else in between that fuels us, that fills us up, even the smallest amount. It's all those little things that bring us smiles, joy, that bring us into the present, that bring us peace and ease, that allow us to have connection, to feel excitement. Self-care is really about choosing to nourish yourself, even in those small, meaningful ways every day. They might seem so small that they're not worthy of our attention, but they have such a profound impact when we are consistently refilling ourselves. We all know that saying, right? You can't give from an empty cup. And it's so incredibly true. If all I do is care for others and worry about others and look after everybody else and do all the things, and I never care for myself, I become depleted. I become resentful too. So self-care is about attending to our own needs. It's about prioritizing ourselves, asking ourselves, what do I need today? And then giving it to yourself without guilt or shame. And that's the secret to this first key, because the top reasons why we as women are not prioritizing our needs is because of guilt and shame. Other people need me. People are counting on me. I don't deserve it. Or maybe we don't believe we're worthy of the care and nourishment that we need. There's some frame of this story playing in most women's minds, and it keeps us from prioritizing and fulfilling our needs. So I want to talk about, oops, I went the wrong way. That's what's happening. Leona. So meet Leona. She's a client I worked with for about 2 years, and she was in a really dark place when I met her. She's no stranger to burnout. She told me that this was her third round with it. She was, in and out, changing jobs, trying to find the right place to land that was going to nourish her, that was really going to help her to just, find that spark and feel like she was making a difference and feel like she was, balanced in her life. But she was struggling really, really hard with depression and those feelings of unworthiness and shame, as well as self-loathing and a lot of fear and pain. Leona was all about everyone else, and she knew logically how important it was for her to care for herself. She acknowledged that likely her suffering was because she wasn't looking after herself, but she found so much resistance to creating a lasting change with it. She was always giving and always doing for others and was stuck in this people-pleasing pattern. She and I worked together for almost 2 years, as I said, and one of the most dramatic shifts that I noticed in Leona, and don't get me wrong, she dug into so many different aspects, but one of the biggest pieces was reprioritizing her life. So every day she had this plan. She would wake up and she would write in her book 2 things. One of them was one thing that she was going to tick off of her to-do list. Okay, because she had a long to-do list. Anybody else have a long to-do list of things that we have to do? Yeah, right? We all have that list. And if I look at that list and I say like, oh, I'm going to get all that done, at the end of the day shows up and I didn't even maybe do one thing, or maybe I did one thing on that list, what's common is that I feel like a failure. I feel like, why can't I get my shit together? Why everybody else has got it all figured out? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this done? And does that motivate anybody to do more? No. I've yet to meet anybody who's motivated by a beatdown. So what she would do is in the morning, she was redefining those expectations that she had of herself. And this is a practice because it didn't just happen overnight. It was confronting to her because that list was there. The mad woman in her head was saying like, oh, you have so much to do, don't forget about that stuff. What about those people? What about that? But so she had to make a conscious effort to redefine what winning looked like for her, what success looked like for her for that day. So she would write down one thing from that to-do list that she was going to do that day, just one. And that was success. And she had to consciously train herself to see that as success. It didn't happen overnight. It happened with consistency to doing that one thing. And the second thing that she wrote down was one thing that she was going to do just for her. Just for her. Not for the house, not for her kids or her spouse or for work or anything. It was just for her. And she committed to herself to do that thing. Every day she would write these things. And what she began to notice is how much less pressure she felt for the rest of the list. Because, like I said, she was redefining her definition of success for the day by setting up that goal of one thing a day. And she was also finding so much more energy and joy by doing one thing for herself, by filling her own cup. And that energy that she was sourcing from inside of her by prioritizing her needs, it motivated her to do more. And she also noticed that if she allowed that one thing for her to slip, she would see in the next days how heavy everything became. Because when we make a commitment to nourish ourselves and then we don't follow through, instead of igniting that fire inside and that passion, we trigger the shame. We trigger the critical, judgmental thoughts in our minds. And we tell ourselves that we're not worthy, whether it's conscious or unconscious. We tell ourselves that we're unworthy of the nourishing that we committed to and that we need. And it does the opposite to that fire. Sometimes when things slip, we can beat ourselves up, and the heaviness of shame and disappointment and guilt can make it so much worse. But as I said, that's not how we motivate ourselves, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about this in the third key, but it's really normal that when we try new things that we might slip and get off track. It happens to all of us. It happens to me. It happens to all of us. What matters most is how we respond when we catch ourselves slipping. And the more we do this work, the more we course correct and pull ourselves back, the quicker we catch ourselves. And Leona really learned over that time to catch herself when she would start to slip into old patterns. And work would be often what would get in her way, right? When she wasn't working, it was so much easier to have these new patterns and to prioritize herself. But when she threw work into the mix, it was like all of a sudden she had so much more on her plate and she couldn't fit herself in. And so she was noticing that, and she realized, I have to find a strategy to make sure that I keep this up. And that's where the list is going to come in helpful. I'll talk about that in a second. But when she would slip, the other piece that was so important was that she would find grace and compassion for herself. She would check her self-talk and make sure that she wasn't beating herself up. And this is really where that community of support that she had in the NurseRx program helped her to create lasting transformation. Because when she would slip, she would always come to the group and she'd be vulnerable and honest with everyone there. And everybody there wasn't judgment, there wasn't criticism, there was just nods and like tears with her, because everybody gets it. And everybody would hold that space for her with love and acceptance. And then she would find strength from within to hit the reset button and try again, to realign. The first key is reprioritizing our lives and putting our needs at the top. And my invitation to you is to do just what Leona did. And to help you get started with ideas, this is where the list comes in. So I want you to write out a list. You might even do this right now, is to grab a piece of paper, write at the top of the list, I commit to nourishing myself daily. And then write anything that brings a spark of joy, a flicker of a smile, a giggle inside, anything that allows you to feel present and connected, allows you to feel ease and relax and peace. Even the smallest things, pulling my blanket up when I get up in the morning and making my bed, it takes me 5 seconds, but it makes me feel good. Think about little things that you can do for yourself. The bonus of this practice is that the more you start doing things just for you, the more you feel inspired to do more things for you, becomes almost like an addiction, because you recognize that, and a healthy addiction, but you recognize that when you don't do it, you feel depleted. And you start to recognize that contrast in yourself. Okay, when I lean in and I do things for myself, even the smallest things, I feel better. And when I don't, I feel shittier. So then you can make a choice. But it really helps to contrast when we can see the two different places. And the bonus also of this is that the list is going to grow, because you're going to start to notice all of the little things that make you spark. You're going to start to shift how you see what's in your life already. And you start to come back to really this beautiful, natural place of gratitude and abundance that you hold, where you're able to see everything in your life in a whole different frame. It seems like the smallest freaking thing. And I know when it was first introduced to me of like, make a list of things that you can do for self-care. Like, I mean, I even say it with that voice because it was so irritating to hear. But I made the list, and she was like, commit to one thing every day. All right, one thing. And I committed. I wasn't perfect. I missed some days, but I committed, and I did as much as I could. And I noticed the difference. I noticed it over time, how different I felt on the days that I didn't do it. So even though it seems like this is one of the most simplest things, it can make a profound impact. I would say if this is the only thing that you do for the next year, is one thing for yourself, you will feel dramatically different. And so much will unfold over that year, because it starts to shift the way you see things. It starts to shift your entire mindset about life when you are nourishing yourself and your needs. My list now is way long. It's like 60 something things. So I encourage you to make this list, even if all you have is 3 to 5 things right now. Post it somewhere where you can see it in the morning. And you can write in your book one thing that you're going to do from your list and one thing you're going to do just for you, and make a commitment to yourself. This is single-handedly the greatest gift that you can give yourself. It gives you your time, your attention, your energy, and think about how good that feels for other people to receive that from you. Now let's try and turn it to ourselves. All right, let's talk about the second key. Oh, I keep going the wrong way. Come on. There we go. The second key is knowing where you stand. Now, this is about clearly knowing what your values are and what is important for you in this life. This is like building a container for that internal fire to really burn. As I mentioned before, I believe the number one cause of burnout in nurses is not actually the short staffing or the management, but rather it's the moral distress and the injury that comes from not being supported, or not being able to care for and help our patients and fulfill our role as nurses in the deep, meaningful, holistic ways that we desire to. We're continually sacrificing our values in order to fit into this ridiculously small, confined, and restrictive box that they want us to fit into. I also believe that a part of why many of us aren't aware of moral distress and moral injury in healthcare, I mean, first of all, we don't really talk about it, but also we might not be necessarily clear on what our core values are. This is not anything to feel ashamed of, because it is a really difficult clarity to find. There's likely over 100 different values that we as human beings can hold. But each of us will have a different ranking as far as how important each value is for us as individuals. Our core values are like the hills that we're willing to die on. They are our island of what we want to allow into our life. Our core values will catapult us into action because it will feel deeply wrong to go against it. But sadly, in our profession, it is a reality that we are faced with countless situations that force us to do things that compromise our values, and sometimes even our core values. And when we do so, when we compromise a part of what makes us who we are, we sacrifice that part of us, and it's painful. And the result is often this moral injury. And what moral injury pushes us to do is to disconnect from ourselves, to disconnect from our feelings in order to be able to continue in this role, in order to continue to compromise and sacrifice what's important to us. We have to turn off the discomfort that it's creating, the pain that it's creating inside of us. But the more we do this, the more we disconnect from ourselves and our internal experience, the worse it gets for us. And we start to experience this flood of emotional overwhelm. We have mental distress, anxiety, fear, depression, shame. It overtakes us, and our body responds with a whole list of potential physical symptoms. Our values make us who we are. They are not something to be sacrificed, but rather to be lived by as our code, as our compass in life. Krista was one of my first clients ever that I worked with as a coach, and she was miserable in nursing. The toxic culture, the bullying, it was eating her apart. It just wasn't what she envisioned it was going to be like for her. Many of us feel the same, right? We're grieving what we had once dreamed nursing would be for us. Krista also was clear about her values, and one of her core values that came to light was autonomy. She was also working as a volunteer for Vaccine Choice Canada, and she was a part of research and information sharing about vaccines, and of course, an extremely hot topic these days. And when the threat to her core value of our autonomy came to cross, she had a choice. As a nurse, she had a choice. And rather than sacrifice her core value, she chose to align with what felt true and right for her. And people often wonder how a person can make such a devastating choice with so much risk of persecution and loss. But what's extremely clear when I think of Krista was that by doing the work in the NurseRx program and on her own too, there was no doubt for her what was right. And although the decision did come with a mountain of persecution and a lot of loss, it also opened up a path for her that is so beautifully aligned, where she's able to work and live in accordance with her values and where she feels respected for those. I want to take a moment here just to really acknowledge my awareness of how polarizing this topic is and has become in the nursing profession. And I don't share this story without knowing that it might trigger some of you listening who hold different beliefs. And if that's the case, I invite you to be with that right now, to take some deep breaths, to feel your feet on the floor, maybe stand up and shake it off, get a drink of water or whatever else you need to feel grounded, but to be with this part of you that is being triggered, because triggers are opportunities for us. A part of me shares Krista's story because I want you to consider, what would you do if something was pressuring you to sacrifice something that you hold significant value in? Maybe one of your core beliefs is connection or family or adventure or laughter. The list goes on. But imagine if something was threatening that core value, what would you do? Also, I sort of put out there, is it possible that more of us in nursing actually also hold these core values of autonomy and safety and dignity and trust? And given everything that's taken place, it's pushed us into the corner, into a position of having to sacrifice one of our core values or something that feels really important to us and is possibly contributing to this extremely high rates of burnout and attrition in our profession. I share her story because knowing our values is critical for us as we attempt to understand why we're struggling and suffering the ways that we are, and the possible and likely moral distress that's underlying. When we understand our core values, gosh, it just does not want to work for me, and make the choices to live by them, we can bit by bit bring our life into alignment. But finding that clarity can be difficult. It can be difficult. So as a starting point, my invitation to you is to ask yourself the question, what's important to me? You can start by just taking a few deep breaths. You might even write it down right now. What are the first words that come to you when you think of what is important to you? What is so highly valuable to you that you would die for it? You would put yourself on the line to fight for it. What are those values for you? And if you don't write it down, I just invite you to reflect on that right now. But as an exercise to participate in, you might even after this, take some moments, breathe, put your hand over your heart, close your eyes, breathe into your body, and ask that question over and over again. What is important to me? What do I value? What is important to me? And then write. uncensored. Just scribble on that page the answer to this question without thinking about it. Just allow the words and the ideas to flow through you onto the page. And when you write that full page, I encourage you to repeat this exercise a few times. Don't read it right away. Just write it out. And then after a few days, maybe if you've done it 3 to 5 times, then make some space to read it. With an open mind and an open heart, just read it and see what are the main themes. Circle it, highlight it, whatever works for you. But notice what continues to come up. My core values: connection, integrity, honesty. You might find that certain values can be grouped together, right? We want to ideally come up with our island of values so that you can imagine, this is where I stand on my island. This is what's important to me in my life. This is what I fight for. This is what I will lower the drawbridge for, and I will also raise it for anything that goes against it. I'm willing to draw that boundary. And that's really where this ties into, is our capacity to set boundaries. If we don't know where we stand, we kind of don't stand anywhere. So finding this clarity can be a process, but this is a first starting point, is just asking yourself this question. And then you can Google, you can find lists of core values or meta values. You can Google that and find exhaustive lists and start looking through and being able to identify the words that describe those values. I love sharing Chris's story because, well, really it illustrates to me, and just a beautiful example of how living a courageous life in alignment with your core values allows you, well, it requires you to take risk, first of all. And it requires you to do difficult things in order to live alignment. But it also allows you to find peace and joy and fulfillment. And I remember the day that she shared with me that she got this job, in this nursing job that she's doing right now, where she feels she's so lit about every aspect of it. And I remember her telling me, and she related it back to, some of the stuff we talk about in the program about following your yes. And I just felt so excited for her, because this is, it's one thing to talk about it and to practice it in your own life, but it's another thing to also witness it in other people. When we choose what's right for us, the world opens up. The potential and the possibilities are right here for you. And I also love sharing this story because it illustrates that in order to live a life in alignment with what's important to you, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to quit being a nurse. Interestingly, the antidote to this pervasive moral distress and injury that's happening in the nursing culture is not what our employers offer. It's not a vacation. It's not even a stress leave. It's not some workshop that you can attend, including this. It's not the answer. The antidote is actually courage. It's courage to live by our own code, our code of morals, our values, and our ethics, no matter what that might look like or how much risk is involved. The courage to know where we stand and to bravely stand there no matter what. Otherwise, we face the consequences of sacrificing those parts of what make us who we are. So let's dig into the third key here. The final key I'm going to share with you today is really about accepting and embracing yourself in all your shades and flavors. It's about owning who you are, owning where you're at, where you've been, and where you want to go. It's embracing all of the mess, or as I call it, the muck. It's the light, the dark, and everything in between. It's owning and feeling all of your emotions. It's putting this experience of shame and unworthiness to bed once and for all, and seeing yourself as the incredible, unique, beautiful person that you are. Self-acceptance is about being okay with where you are right now and at all moments. It's loving ourselves through it all, through all the mess and all the beauty, no matter what. It's unapologetic. It's having compassion for ourselves and our struggles. It's about celebrating what makes us unique, what makes us who we are. It's really about letting that internal fire absolutely roar. I want you to meet Jen. We met at the tail end of 2021, and also someone who was not in a very good place. She was struggling with depression in all the worst ways. And when we first started working together, she repeatedly said to me, I don't think nursing is the issue. I think it's all the other parts of my life. And I reassured her that, first of all of the different corners of our life interact. They intertwine. We are like this, woven together fabric of all of these different elements in our health and our well-being and in our life and our experiences. Oh, my iPad just died. So there goes our presentation, but you're going to get me anyways. Are we good? You guys can still hear me, see me? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I reassured her that, first of all of these pieces play together. And secondly, that NurseRx is actually not about nursing. Rather, it's for women who are living with depression and anxiety, who are feeling lost and stuck in their lives, who are feeling hopeless, helpless, who are feeling disempowered, unsure where to go next, and are screaming inside, are feeling this call inside to be unleashed. It's for women who have been engulfed in this trance of shame and unworthiness, but have seen a glimmer of something more, who feel this spark inside. There is something more for me, and who are ready to dig deep, to face those dark places, to face those shadows, to do the difficult work, and to find out just what more is out there for them. The fact that we are all nurses adds to the group, because we all get it. We all get what that part of our life is like for us. I mean, even today in the group, I can share, we talked about nursing. We talked about the difficulties in the workplace, the bullying, the unsupportive management. We talked about the petty, cliquey bullshit that happens in nursing. And then we talked about how that impacts the rest of our lives too, how that contributes, and how it also has left many of us in this place of grieving and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. NurseRx is about so much more than just nursing. It's about the whole woman, and it's about remembering who we are and why we're here. And so when Jen shared that with me about I don't think this is for me because I think it's, it's these other parts of my life, she was so reassured to hear that part that I just shared with you. But then she experienced the work in the group and she realized I wasn't lying. So one of the practices that truly allowed Jen to break free of the depression and the shame stories and the anxiety was the practice of self-celebration. Don't get me wrong, this woman, she prioritized herself and set boundaries like a boss. She showed up every week and shared stories about how she was willing. She was willing to go to these difficult places. She dug deep and she bravely faced herself and all the shadows and all the patterns and all the difficulties that were coming her way, and that had come her way throughout her life. And she gradually came to really come to a place where she was celebrating every step of it. It allowed her to step out of those shadows of shame and depression and embrace everything that made her who she was, to glow and gleam in her light. And celebrating in a community, it just takes that self-acceptance to the next level, because it meant she got to own it all, even though that's scary, right? Step out and say, hey, look at me. This is me. I'm a big fucking mess. And then to have other women just hold her and accept her, to feel that kind of true, authentic belonging without judgment or criticism or anyone needing to fix her, which is not what we get in our current system for mental and emotional health, but to be really heard and seen and loved and accepted, and to feel like we belong as our true selves, without armor and without fear. This meets basic needs in all of us. And it also requires us to have a safe space of trust to lean into, to practice this, because it is hard. It's uncomfortable. Celebrating yourself is uncomfortable, which is crazy. But we've been conditioned to believe that it's selfish, it's egotistical to celebrate yourself, or whatever other stories that we have in our minds of how we've been taught that celebrating looks. But it is the most effective way to rebuild true self-love. And doing it in that community, it lights up so many different parts of what make us who we are, of our human needs. So how do we celebrate ourselves? So I learned from just an incredible coach, Megan Jo Wilson, who learned from Mama Gina, who is Regina Thomashower, who I'm sure learned from somebody else. But we practice what's called the art of the brag. And the simplest way to start this in your own lives is in your journal or with someone you love and trust. And every day take a few moments to celebrate your wins. Write down or share 3 things that you want to celebrate. Some days, right, Natalie? Some days you have to dig deep. And on those heavy days, this practice is all that much more critical for you. My husband and I have this practice together now. We do this every night. We share 3 wins together. And some nights, just the other night, he's away. He's been gone for a month, and he's been tossed from one bed to another. Some nights he doesn't know if he's getting food. He's at a camp, and it's just a shit show. And he was sharing his wins, and he was like, I just don't feel like I have anything to win today. I don't feel like I have anything to celebrate. And that's where I was like, no, sorry, hon. Like, you're going to have to dig your way there. And he did, because this is our practice. And when you have someone to support you, to show up for you in that way, it can be really helpful. But I share that because sometimes I'm on the other end of it too. Sometimes I'm like, I really don't want to share. I don't want to celebrate today. Like, I feel like crap. I'm feeling all this shame about how I yelled at my kids and how I didn't get that shit done. And like, I feel all this heaviness. And those are the days that we especially need to claw and just dig our way to celebration, because it allows us to shift our energy. It doesn't invalidate the pain, right? Because that's important. And I talk about that lots in my program, about sitting in the muck and just being in the muck and the mess of what we're going through, and the heavy emotions, and being with ourselves through it all. But we also have to be thinking about, how can I shift? How can I do something really small to shift? And celebrating is the most effective way. And add into that gratitude. I can't dismiss gratitude. It goes kind of hand in hand. Sometimes we call them bragatitudes, whatever you want to say, but it's in combining brags and celebrations with gratitude. And it's really about where you pour your energy into in your life, right? If I'm continually focused on the heavy stuff that happened that day, and all the ways that I didn't meet my expectations, and all the ways that I feel like I let people down, and all the things that I didn't get done, if I'm focusing there, what does that feel? I mean, I can feel it in my body just talking about it, right? Whereas if I dig my way to a place of celebrating and really thinking back through my day, trying to pull out all the moments that were good, it shifts how I feel. It instantly shifts how I feel. And this is something, if you're still working, this is something you can do as a practice after your shift too, is to spend some time in your car before you transition and go home, or wherever it is that you're going after your shift, is to spend some time and tease out the good. Tease it out, because we can spend so much of our energy just, talking about how awful it is, and how heavy it is, and how many crappy things happen, and how stressful it was, and all that. But if we can take a few moments to pull out those good pieces, where you had that, that connection with that patient, where maybe your colleague noticed that you were feeling crappy and she gave you a hug, or you just sat quietly with someone, or you danced at the nursing station, like whatever. It can be the smallest things, or it can be big things, but to try to pull those out, it redirects our energy to something that is serving us. And where our energy goes is what will nourish and flow. So if I'm continually spending my time celebrating and finding gratitude in life, it returns me back to this natural place that sees all of the abundance in my life, that sees all of the good, all of the blessings. So just try it right now. Even you can share in the chat. I want you to celebrate something. Start it with, I brag that I get the entire week to myself. My kids are gone. My husband's gone. I'm like 11 and a half freaking years, ladies, and I'm on my own. I brag. And I own that, because it's like, it was freaking hard at first. I was like, what do I do with myself? Anyway, share in the chat, please. Celebrate. It's as uncomfortable as it might feel. Put yourself into that space. Infuse your energy into something you want to celebrate. It can be big or small. We talked today about, like, sometimes it might just be like, I got out of bed this morning and I had a shower. I changed my underwear. Like, maybe it's something small, maybe it's big, who knows? It's about owning every single bit of your story. And I love sharing Jen's story because it fills me with my own celebration and gratitude as I reflect on the journey that I've had with her. And it's just such a beautiful example of what can happen for you if you commit and you do the uncomfortable work. So I know I said there was 3 keys, but really there is an additional piece to all of this. And I also have, made sure that I was clear that there is a lot more to this whole journey of healing and dealing with the suffering and the struggling that we're going through. But these 3 pieces are really, really important and really critical and can create a massive transformation in your life by committing and being consistent. But one additional piece that we can't undervalue or underestimate is personal support. And I know that probably there might be somebody or maybe all of you here who felt like I did once upon a time, that I can do this on my own. But really what I recognized that in myself, and I used to just be like extremely independent. I just always thought I had to do it on my own. And it was in a way of trying to prove that I had it all together. Probably prove to myself, but definitely also to prove to others. It was a toxic old belief pattern that I had around asking for help, but also feeling unworthy and like a failure. But the truth is that we are all meant to thrive with each other. We are meant for community. We all need help. We all need guidance and support on our journeys. In fact, that is actually a necessary part of how we evolve and grow. People come along on each of our paths to help us move to the next chapter. It's not a chance that we're all here together. There is something here for each and every one of us, myself included, to help us through this particular chapter that we are in. There's no quick fix solutions. This is life, and this is your journey in it, and how you choose to take steps forward is your journey. And I truly believe that everything that we ask for, that we need, will come to us. And you may have been asking for support, maybe silently, maybe out loud, maybe with that all too common prayer that we say of, there has to be a better way. This can't be it. There's got to be something else. And I spend parts of my day, every single day, listening for those calls and listening to myself on how I can best answer them. How can I show up for these people? How can I help? And this workshop today is really about how I am attempting to answer your prayer. And that's what my role as a holistic wellness coach is really about. I can give you loads of advice and suggestions and resources and tips. And I literally have all of that beautifully packaged up with a nice bow for you to receive. But creating these lasting shifts that we are aching for, what makes the difference is the accountability and the personal support and that authentic acceptance that I talked about that happens in the group. And also someone who is trauma informed and knowledgeable and who has gone on their own journey, who knows how to get to the root of the challenges. Because all the advice in the world doesn't amount to anything if there's something holding us back from acting on that advice. And this is the work that I have learned and trained and do as a holistic wellness coach. My focus as a coach is really to support you to unpack the heavy load that you're carrying, to navigate the stress, the emotional overwhelm, the trauma, the self-doubt, the limiting beliefs that keep us stuck and imprisoned in our lives. As I said, I call this part sitting in the muck, and it's also digging through the muck, and it's not fun. I won't lie. It's messy and hard and painful and uncomfortable, but it's also worth it. Because when we allow ourselves the time and the space to move through this sludge that we've been dragging around, we get to feel better. We get to feel lighter, more energized, more motivated, clear, confident, and we can take back the power over every aspect of our lives. We can live our lives aligned with what is best for us, with what serves us, with what fills us up, and we can live our lives feeling empowered and true and making decisions from that place. And this doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. The ripple spreads. It spreads into your family, it spreads into your workplace. So we've covered a lot. There's been a lot. I get it. Take a deep breath. And I'm just going to take a moment to recap. And as I mentioned, I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about, and I'll actually just show you because I lost my screen. I'll have to open it up in a different way. But I want to show you what the NurseRx course and program and community looks like so that you can feel clear about what that opportunity is and if it feels right for you. And then we'll talk about how we can make that happen if it does feel right. So take a deep breath. And as I recap, I want you just to, again, land on one of these keys that really is resonating for you and that you feel inspired to take action with over the next few days. And no matter where you go from this point forward, I encourage you, if you want to reach out to me and share with me how, how you've implemented this step, or where you're getting stuck, or any way that I can support you, please don't hesitate. So the first one was reprioritizing your life. And the action step was to create a pleasure list, all the things that fill you up, posting it somewhere where you can see it every day, and committing to doing something that's just for you as many days as possible. Second was knowing where you stand, and the action step was to get clear and to do the journaling exercise of what is important for you, closing your eyes and doing it for a few days in a row and reflecting on all that you wrote and finding that clear vision of what you want on your island. Your island is your life. What is it that is so important to you that you will fight for, that is absolutely core to your being? And the third key is to embrace yourself and find acceptance for yourself. And the action step was to write or share 3 celebrations every day, to practice owning where you're at and everything that you do and celebrating it no matter what. And of course, that fourth key that is absolutely essential, of finding personal support, because that's what makes the transition from knowledge and understanding to action and momentum. And so your next step from here really is to choose one of those, make a commitment to yourself. Any of those steps are going to help you immensely as you move forward. And you really have 2 choices in finding a solution to where you're at right now. The first choice is to go at it alone and piece it all together. You can take your notes from today. You can do Google searches. You can download, 500 different free gifts off of people's websites and piece it all together and do it on your own. And this is a valid approach. Like, don't get me wrong. It's one that I've taken through so many different aspects of this journey for myself. But what I shared with you too is that, like, a lot of that was my own internal belief that I wasn't worthy of spending money on. I wasn't worthy of the time. Nothing was going to work for me. I should be able to do this on my own. That extreme independence pattern that I later learned was a trauma response rooted in fear. And I know that this journey can be done on your own, but I also don't recommend it because I've done both. And you're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy. And the process is going to move painfully slow, which means that there is a lot of opportunities to quit. And if you don't have personal support, it's a lot easier to quit, right? So if you're someone who likes to take action to get where you're meant to be rather than the long route, then you want to dig deep and you feel ready to really get into yourself and to create actual lasting transformation, then your second option is to take this journey with support. And then if this appeals to you, like I said, I'm going to share with you a little bit about the Nurse RX program. And I did mention that Natalie, who's here today, she's a part of the program right now. So if she feels inclined to share a little bit of her experience, you're welcome to put that in the chat, Natalie. But no pressure on you. You definitely do not have to. So what I'm going to do, because I lost my screen, just bear with me a moment. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up. All right, here's maybe where it is. Let me know with a thumbs up if you can see this. Everyone can see this? Yeah, cool. So I'll share you the link so you can dig through this on your own too. This is just a lot of stuff about, everything we've kind of talked about. And what I want to get into is I want to show you what's all included, because there's essentially 2 pieces of the program. There is the online portion, which is a self-study format, where there is 12 modules of content, and it is absolutely loaded. I can't really downplay that. There is a lot of content in there. And so the intention is for it all to be there so that you can move through it at your own pace. Some of the modules you might take a day, you might take a week to get through, or whatever. It might take you an hour to get through, and you might just do one a week. Some of the modules might take you a few weeks because there's a lot more to them, or they are deeper explorations and a lot more different stuff will come up. And so really the intention is for all of that to be there for you to move through at your own pace. And you'll find the different chapters like I was talking about. So there's dreaming and scheming, shifting your perspective. You can read these. Befriending your mad woman, which is the mindset and our inner critic, our judgmental mind. It plays into everything, and this is by far the number one aha moment that women share with me after they've done the program is this befriending your mad woman aspect. There's trauma. We talk about the way that trauma is develops in our body and the way that we adapt to it, the way that we try to protect ourselves with different patterns of behavior, different belief systems in order to try to keep us from having to experience painful experiences again. And so just as a note on the trauma piece is that there are, like, we've all probably heard big T, little t trauma, right? Yes, everyone's sort of heard that before. So big T, you would think of, like rape or war or motor vehicle accidents or abuse. Big T, they're often bigger experiences. The little T's are what I tend to focus on more. Big T traumas, they often come up in the program, but they also, I believe, require more in-depth support. And it's not to say that we couldn't deal with that in more of a one-on-one basis, but they require more. The little t traumas, though, however, are what we've all experienced. These are rejection. They are, the time that your teacher said you're stupid, or the time that your dad forgot to pick you up from the bus. That's one of mine. Or the time that, the girls didn't invite you, you didn't get invited to the party, or no one came to your own party. It's these little experiences that we've all had throughout our life that seem kind of meaningless, seem kind of small, kind of petty, if we look at the grand scheme of like the horror that happens in this world sometimes, but they impact us. Trauma isn't necessarily what happened, it's what happens inside of you. And if we don't have the tools and the resources and the support to process what happens to us, it gets stuck. And then it shows up and it plays out in our life as adults. And so a big part of this chapter 4 is really about understanding that, understanding our window of tolerance, and then understanding how our body adapts to that pain, and then how can we unwind it. Moving the feels, so all the emotions, letting go, digging into your passion and your Dharma. Dharma is really this concept of that every single one of us has unique gifts and a unique expression of those gifts in this life. And when we find a way to serve others with those gifts and that expression of those gifts, that creates the yes life. That's the spark. That's like the excitement. I can't wait to get to work today. I can't wait to see what's going to happen today. We all want that. And Dharma can play in other areas of life, not just work, just so you know. And then you can see some other things like prioritizing you, boundaries and core values, like we've talked about today, knowing your worth and unleashing your potential. So that's the course. And in the course, there is those 12 chapters. Each week, there's also a recorded Kundalini yoga practice. And so Kundalini yoga is a different form of yoga. If you've never explored it before, I don't recommend you Google it. You can just talk to me or try out one of my free videos, because it's really about the chakras and energy system in the body. And it gets into repetitive postures and movements where you are really shaking up that stuck energy. And so the exercises, the practices in each week are meant to complement what we're talking about in the self-exploration exercise that's happening in that particular chapter. There's also multiple recorded meditations, guided meditations. There's so many different printable resources, downloadable videos. You also get access to I currently have 2 groups, and one of them is a grad group, and every month we have a guest speaker. And so as a part of the community, you would have access to that guest speaker as well. And so they always bring in, a whole different perspective. Although similar, they offer us different tools, different ways of understanding, and it's just a really amazing bonus to add into what already is happening. And then you also get the 12 weeks of membership in the community. And so in that community, there's 2 different calls during the week. And one of them is a small group coaching session where you show up and you have the opportunity to step into the healing seat where you can receive individualized support, or you can just witness. You can just be there to observe and to learn. And both roles in the call have a really amazing opportunity for you to learn and to create momentum in your life towards where it is that you want to go. Everybody who takes an opportunity in the healing seat gets that personalized attention, but also those that are witnessing. What happens is that we see the common threads in our human experience, right? If I'm talking about something, just like you've listened to me today, you've probably had lots of things ping inside of you as I've shared my story. And when you hear others sharing their story, the same thing happens. We also have another call that week, every week, which is a practice session where sometimes we do Kundalini live, sometimes we do, we always do a meditation and some kind of exercise that just helps us, has us bringing things to our awareness, as well as lots of sharing and support in those calls as well. So I said all that piece there. This is where I want to land before we have our conversation, because this is a question for everybody: is how much does it cost, right? How much does it cost to participate? And I have been, I'm going to close out of here so that I can just talk. I have been exploring a whole different way of doing business. And when I think about the ways that I do health, it's quite different than what I was taught and exposed to through most of my life. And when I think about business, a lot of it doesn't feel good for me. A lot of it feels really icky. I want to share a quote with you before we go. It's one of my favorites, and it's jump and grow wings on the way down. And I heard this years and years ago, but it stuck with me. And what it's meant for me is that sometimes things are scary, and sometimes there's risk, and sometimes it's like feels uncertain, and I don't know how this is going to work. And we might have this whole monkey madwoman mind playing in our upstairs, but jump, like trust what feels right. Trust that if this feels right for you, to follow it. Trust and jump. And as you jump, you will grow wings on the way down. And we actually are growing those wings together. And it's just such a beautiful unfolding. So I'm so grateful for you for being here. I'm so grateful that we were this small, intimate group of women, that we had an opportunity to share, because that doesn't always happen when there's lots of people. So and I'm really looking forward to hopefully having you some of you join into, or all of you join into the space in August. So you know how to find me. There's my email. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll get an email too with the replay. So if you want to watch it again, or you want to share it with somebody, please don't hesitate to do that. So